Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, you want to go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. So, I'm a native New Mexican, born and raised. Lived in the Albuquerque area till I was about 10. And then my family moved back to Kirtland up in the northwest corner and graduated from there. Went to school at Arizona State University, got my degree in secondary education. I also spent 6 years in the Arizona Army National Guard from 2006 to 2012, and I was an infantryman and did a deployment to Afghanistan in 2007 to 2008. After school, went to work for a couple Fortune 500 companies and spent my last year in USA with USAA in San Antonio, and then moved back home in 2016 to work for my family business, and that's where I've been since. And so I work now just with my parents' family business that we have up in the northwest corner. And now I am trying to convince people that they should vote for me up in the upcoming election.
Not the easiest thing to do, right? Well, today we're going to just go over some of the basic things you can find on his website. It's all on the up here in the corner. You can look at it. It's Manning for U. Let's see. Let me double check it. Manning for NM.com. So go check it out. We're going to go over the four basic things. I've already done a little bit of research, and we're just going to talk about it. So today, I went over the health policy. We had a few questions about HSAs and primary direct care. Can you go ahead and explain that to us?
Certainly. So, health savings accounts, or HSAs, are a health insurance account that was set up by Congress a couple decades ago, which allows you to pay for medical expenses that you have. Now, unfortunately, under the current legislation, there's a lot of restrictions on who is allowed to have a health savings account and what you're allowed to use them for. But I think they're a great tool that we could use in lowering healthcare costs and making healthcare more personable and a lot more, I would say, user friendly. Health insurance gets, a bad rap for being extremely complicated, but that's mostly because we, as the consumers of it, we as the individuals who have the insurance, really kind of have a hands-off approach to it, and it's mostly, taken care of by our employer. And the only way that we deal with it is when we're paying our co-pays or our premiums each month. So, under my vision, we would make health savings accounts available. What your health insurance plan is, you would be able to have a health savings account. Now, the advantage of a health savings account over the current system where your employer pays your premiums, uh, this health savings account is something that you own. So this is your money. So let's just take a hypothetical, and I'll give you an example of how it kind of worked when I worked at USAA. So with USAA, we had our but we got a card, in essence, a debit card that USAA would preload with half of my year's deductible on it. And in my mind, your employers would fund your health savings account kind of like this prepaid Visa card would work. So the employer is still paying for your insurance costs, but it's going to your health savings account. And then you use your health savings account to pay for any bills. So whenever I went to the doctor and I paid my co-pays or I got my prescriptions, I just gave them that card and it was, deducted from that account. So in my system, you would have a health savings account. You would most likely have a card, same thing. And when you would go and make your medical expense payments, whatever they were, you would simply use your card. Now, what this does is it in essence transfers us from a third party vendor payer system where your doctor bills the insurance company and then the insurance company pays a portion of it and then you make another payment possibly because it wasn't something that was covered in your network. Instead, we're in essence paying cash. Now, obviously, if you have ever paid cash for medical services, you know you get a discount, typically around 15%. And so, what I imagine if this really takes off and a lot of people get a health savings account and we're paying cash for more of our minor medical issues, our day to day medical care, that's going to be a driver to drive down healthcare costs. And that's something that, Medicare for All or any of the current plan that we have, none of that address costs. But as much as we can remove actually a insurance billing from our healthcare, that's a way to drive down costs. And so I think that is something that only makes insurance personable, but also far more effective, more efficient, and something that's not nearly as complex.
Okay, so do you see any hiccups or any challenges going into Congress that would slow this down, or how fast do you think we could push this through?
Yeah, there's going to be challenges, particularly from the health insurance industry. And that's part of the reason why I don't accept any money from corporations or any unions, because I don't want to go in with any even appearance that I have any obligation to them. They are going to fight this because this kind of takes away some of their business. But when you talk to medical providers, they like this idea. And the reason for that is because they hate dealing with health insurance. They spend hundreds of hours filling out insurance claims. It takes sometimes months for them to get paid. And there's this in network, out of network, which always complicates things. But when you're just paying cash, there's no concern about are you in network, are you out in network. There's no forms for your provider to fill out, which reduces the amount of hours that they have to spend doing non medical care. Um, I said the combination of all these is a big driver to drive down healthcare costs. And so I think when more people understand the structure of it and the way that it would work in reality, they see the advantages of it. I was doing an interview with KKOB the other day, and we were going over this, and the interviewer was like, "Huh, that's intriguing," and he actually helped me over for a couple extra segments because he was intrigued and he understood that this was something different. This was something new that he hadn't heard, and that's the response a lot of times. People go, okay, this is new. I think my system is a unique system. I don't know anyone else who has put forward as much of a structural change to our healthcare and health insurance system, but one that I think is very practical.
Well, it does definitely sound awesome and sounds like something I would definitely can get behind. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about your healthcare policy?
The other major thing that I've been pushing and talking a lot about, and I did a Facebook Live the other day, is direct primary care. So your primary care physician is the doctor who knows you the best. You may have been going to this doctor for a decade. You've taken your children to them. And under our current system, which is called a fee for service system, every time you go in, there's an incentive for the doctor to have you come into the office because that's the only way they can get paid. They can't just do a text, consult. They can't do a video consult and bill your health insurance company. You have to come in. Now, this delay in getting care. It may take a week or 2 weeks to get to see your doctor. Also, again, there's that health insurance issue. Whenever you go to the doctor, you don't know how much you're going to pay exactly. It may be just a $25 copay, or you may have additional costs that your health insurance declined to pay. And then you get a letter a couple months after your visit, and now you've got to pay an additional bill. Under a direct primary care model, it's in essence, think of it as a subscription service. You pay a low monthly fee to your primary care physician, again, paid from your health savings account that your employer funded. And for the $30 to $150, depending on age and number of people in your family, you get unlimited access to your doctor, and that's all you pay. So everything that your doctor can do in the office, whether it's just a regular visit, a checkup, whether you're going in for strep throat or you need to do some panels, anything that your doctor can do in the office is covered. Generally, it's about 97% of the covered of the services that doctors offer is covered in your monthly subscription. Now, whenever you have to do one of the examples I've given in one of my videos, a doctor who he doesn't have the ability to do a cholesterol panel without sending it out, but that's $2. That's what he charges his patients extra for that because he does it at wholesale cost. And what this does again drives down costs. Your primary care physician is not spending hundreds of hours, and their staff aren't spending hundreds of hours filling out insurance claims. They're getting paid that monthly subscription. Uh, this is shown to reduce ER visits by up to 42%. That is a major, then again, another driver pushing down healthcare costs since hospitalizations and ER are some of the most expensive costs that we have in the medical community. The other thing it does is 95% of physicians who are in the direct primary care model offer same day or next day service, and 58% of them make house calls. So when's the last time you had a doctor that was willing to come to your house? So like I said, this is something that provides a lot of satisfaction to patients, and particularly for doctors. Because with the Affordable Care Act and some of the new legislation pushed through, a lot of doctors have fatigue. They're burning out. They don't like the system. And again, everyone has to come in under that system. But under this new idea, this direct primary care, the doctor doesn't have to make those concessions to care. And instead, the only thing they're worried about is what is the best way to treat my patient. And so you have massive satisfaction under this, which then will obviously lead to more physicians coming in, which then alleviates a lot of the shortages that we have in the medical community because you don't get that burnout. You don't have the doctors who are just so fed up with it they leave medicine. They get to be doctors again, and like I said, it's a 98% satisfaction.
It sounds like I'd be satisfied with that. I mean, the speed of service would sound great, the low cost. I don't see any why anybody would object to this. I really don't. But let's go ahead and jump on to the next subject. We're going to go ahead and talk about education next. Uh, I'm a huge fan of school choice, and I saw that that's something that you were advocate for as well. And you were talking about school vouchers. You want to go ahead and explain that to us?
Certainly. So I got my degree in secondary education with my emphasis in history. So education is a passion of mine. It's something that I spend a lot of time, and it's not something that many federal candidates spend a lot of time talking about. And I think particularly in New Mexico, that is something that is critical because we have one of the worst public education systems in the nation. So with the school voucher, the way that I would, in essence, see it working, you as the parent would have a voucher that you would be able to use to help send your children to whichever school that you chose, whether that was in the public school or whether it was a private, you know, like St. Pius as an example, to help pay for the tuition at St. Pius, one of the elite schools here in the valley. And then it also subverts a lot of the idea of funding a system. I'm not too concerned about whether we're funding a system because this then is about funding the children and giving you, the parent, the ability to send your children to whichever school you think is best for them. Now, another thing that we need to address is APS. APS is what I call a failure factory. There was a study done around 2016 of the 100 largest school districts in the nation. APS is one of them, and they were looking at graduation rates. APS finished 99th in that ranking. There was only one city or one district out of those 100 that had a lower graduation, and that was the Milwaukee School District. So that is something that I don't think is a success. It's not something that I'm really concerned about ensuring that they continue to take more of your tax-paid dollars. APS should be broken up. This is something that has a lot of research. So people intuitively know that a small class size is an advantage to education, right? Students perform better in a small class than they do in a large class. This is also shown to be at the school-wide level. So small schools typically have better competency rates, have better graduation rates than their large school peers. But this also extends to large districts. There's also advantages to small school districts. So APS should be what's called deconsolidated. You basically take APS, you break it up into 8 to 10 different school districts. Now what you've done is you've also created competition within the public education system right here in the valley. And now these 10 different school districts, still public, nothing really changes on that end. But now you as a parent, you have multiple choices and you have multiple streams of thought of how those districts are going to operate. And again, now we've created this natural environment for competition, and the school districts now have to compete to ensure that they're improving and sending, producing a good product in essence. And if not, then parents are going to go to one of the neighboring districts. They're going to say, well, Monzano, let's say Monzano School District, that's where I would have gone to school, isn't doing as well as one of the other school districts in the valley. And they're like, okay, let's enroll my students there. And enough people move, that forces changes at the school district that is underperforming. And what we slowly will see then is an advancement of all the districts. And so that's one way to I think, change the way public education is done here in New Mexico.
Well, I definitely like the idea of breaking up the districts into more because that would give us as parents more insight and more control over what each district is capable of doing. Am I correct on that aspect?
Correct. Again, with the system that we have right now, you have what, a 7 member board for the entirety of nearly 500,000 people. As a school board member, can you be representative of the entire valley or even the section that you have? I don't think so. But if we have 70 school board members, now you as a parent have a lot better ability to talk to your school board to influence them because now they have a much smaller base that they have to pay attention to as the school board members. Again, this idea of public schools are set up not because of a pedagogical reason, but because of the public interest. We often see, particularly in times of recession, there's an effort to consolidate school districts and particularly small school districts. But when you look at the research, and I believe it was Indiana did a study in 2007, 2008, when we had the last recession, they were looking for ways to save money. And they looked obviously at the consolidation of their small school districts. But they did something unique that only they in Massachusetts I have seen actually do. They then looked at, well, what are the savings of deconsolidation? So you take those large school districts of maybe 5,000 or so, 5,000 students, and they actually came back and found that the deconsolidation of those large school districts would save them hundreds of millions of dollars more than the consolidation of small school districts. Again, that's a counterintuitive idea because we've always been taught that, oh, as we take these small units and we form a singular unit, we lose a lot of these administrative costs. But that's actually not the case when you actually look at the data. And the reason for it is you get a large school district, you have a lot of mid-level management that is created just in the sheer size. And by making a district smaller, you eliminate that, and now you eliminate some of the mid-level bureaucracy.
Okay. Can you explain the with the underfunded schools, how will this help them?
Well, here in New Mexico, we actually have a really, I would say, equitable funding system. The metrics that we have, the way that New Mexico schools are funded, they're pretty well funded. I think it's one of the few areas where New Mexico actually gets a top 10 rating, saying that the funding between the poorest school districts and the richest school districts, there's not a massive difference. So that is the one thing I'll credit New Mexico for, even though right now there is a lawsuit that will probably change that formula and in essence, send a little bit more funding towards the school districts which have reservations and the military installations where they aren't able to attract property taxes. So I don't see it would have much change in that area as far as the funding goes, but it definitely gives a lot more control to the parents.
Right, and that's what they need is a little bit more control over their child's education. I'm definitely a fan of that. Do you have anything else you want to bring up about education plans for Congress?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next subject then, which is about the military and the foreign wars that we're involved in. Now, I grew up in a military family, and I know what it's like to have parents leave and my friends not get to see their parents again. I'm a huge fan of bringing them back and not engaging in foreign wars. Can you explain to us how you plan on pushing this into Congress and trying to help bring these families homes and get us out of unnecessary war?
Yeah, the last 20 years, Congress has ceded its power to the presidency. And I'm somebody who's very much constitutionalist. I believe that there are very clear guidelines that say this is the responsibility of Congress, this is the responsibility of the presidency. And in our war on terror, we have, in essence, the Congress has conceded its war powers to the executive. I'm not going to go in and allow that to continue. So I won't vote in favor of any bills that still fund our foreign wars. Um, Now, President Biden has announced that he's going to remove troops from Afghanistan. in September. That's a good thing. I hope that that actually happens. But we also have to understand that Donald Trump had already came to an agreement to remove troops in May, and the Biden administration pushed that deadline back. So I'm concerned that 3 or 4 months from now, you're going to have the military-industrial complex and the generals getting it in the ear Biden saying, "Well, we can't leave now. It's just too dangerous. It'll threaten our national security." But it doesn't. Right? Biden moved the removal of troops back to September 11th for a purely propaganda reasons. It's just so that way he can say we're leaving on the anniversary of September 11th. And again, these are some of the issues as somebody who served in the military. I hate seeing the military being used as this is. I am not going to put the military, into foreign nations to fight civil wars. And that's what Syria. Syria is a civil war that we are involved in, and we shouldn't be. We should have left Iraq a long time ago, but we're back in Iraq. These are nations where there is not a national strategic threat to the United States. And I know, though, people will talk about, well, what about ISIS? They were a legit threat. Well, they were a legit threat to Syria and Iraq, but they weren't a legit threat to the United States. They have no ability to attack the United States. And again, why were they able to develop our invasion of Iraq? Without the invasion of Iraq, there is no ISIS. So we have to look at what actually caused that to happen, what actually caused ISIS to be able to develop in the Middle East. And it was our foreign wars in Iraq. So if we stop invading nations, we stop deposing the government, whether we like the government or not, if we stop doing that, we're going to stop creating these power vacuums that allow terrorist organizations to develop. And we increase our security because these terrorist organizations never develop. We don't have Libya happening where you have open air slave markets have returned. And again, the whole purpose of the Libya invasion was just to remove Gaddafi under a false pretext that he was coordinating with some terrorist organization and that he posed a threat to the United States and NATO. Again, these false pretenses of war have harmed America's security, and I won't stand for it anymore. I will not allow the United States military to be used as a proxy war.
Right. I think it was Rand Paul who in the 2008 primaries was talking about how we invited the 2001 terrorist attack because, yet again, we've been involved in these foreign wars and these civil wars that we, in my opinion, shouldn't be a part of. You may call me crazy. I don't think we should be interfering with other people's problems. We are in America. We have our own problems. We should address those first. Uh, so I'm 100% on bringing our troops home and doing only fighting defensive wars, as I believe you've brought up before. Is there any other things you want to talk about with the military and bringing them home, or any other things that might stop you from doing such?
Again, we have both parties have become war parties. Joe Biden was in favor of the invasion of Iraq. He was in favor of Syria and Libya. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, they're pro war, and I'm not. As somebody who has actually had to be in a combat zone, somebody who has seen his friends killed overseas, I understand that war should always be a last resort, uh, and that we kind of sideline our State Department and our diplomacy, our soft diplomacy, far too much. We rely too much on the military to be our diplomatic arm, and that's not what the military is designed to do. It isn't the proper role of the United States military. Our role is the defense of the United States from foreign and domestic enemies. Um, but the Middle Eastern countries don't pose a threat to the United States. And soft diplomacy is a far better option, and one that we as a government don't practice enough.
Right? Just bring our troops home. That's all we can ask, right? Nobody wants to be at the funeral of their friend's family member, whether it's a brother in arms, as you said. Thanks you again for your service in Afghanistan. It takes courage, even though I know it's something that you have to sign up for first, and then they send you over. But at the same time, thank you for your service. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to the final subject we got today. We're going to be talking about immigration. So we all know that there's a humanitarian crisis going on at the border right now, even though many people don't want to admit to it. My question for you is, if joining Congress, what actions can you take to help end this crisis? And then what actions do you plan on taking to help prevent this in the future?
All right. So the immigration crisis that we've got going on right now is, again, we have to look at what are the drivers. And when it comes to the asylum process, one of the drivers is current law requires an asylee to be at the United States border in order to apply for asylum, or you have to be at a port of entry. What that means is you have to physically come to the United States in order to apply for asylum. That is a driver. So the obvious solution then is to change the law on asylum and allow you to apply for asylum from your home nation. Now, that only then not only is going to help reduce the number of people who come to the border, because now they can apply for asylum in Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala, but also it makes our asylum process a lot more fair. Because if you think about it right now, the way that it operates, our asylum process advantages Central Americans over all other nations, even though maybe those in Central Africa have a much better claim to asylum. They simply don't have the ability to apply for asylum because they're tens of thousands of miles away and an ocean away. Then make it a lot more fair of a system, I believe. Second, what it does, it allows the United States government to do a much better background check and investigate those who are applying for asylum. We can, validate their claims a lot better because if they're in their home nation, then they can bring, supporting documentation of who they are. Whereas the current system we have, most people coming to the border have no identification, and we have to try and figure out who they are and are they actually the person that they say they are. So again, I think this is an advantage, also when you're looking at the security issue, because then we have a much better understanding of who is actually applying for asylum. And then the second thing I think we need to do is we need to increase our legal immigration. I'm a big proponent of allowing people to come to the United States. It has clearly been part of our identity. Since the middle of the Bush administration, we've allowed about 1 million people a year to immigrate. I think we should increase that to 300 to 500,000 people a year. Again, this eliminates some of the drivers because if we open up more spots for people to come and apply legally, well, what are they going to do? They're going to apply legally, right? Because now we have no more ability to take in the people who want to come and be American citizens. And I think, oftentimes, first generation Americans, people who actively made the choice to come to the United States are some of our, staunchest patriots. And so that's what I want to increase. I want to increase more US citizens coming and living the dream that we have. And I think these are two, common sense changes to policy which then eliminate a lot of the southern border crisis that we have.
I would have to agree with you on the first generation because I'm only third generation Irish. My family only moved here to America about 80 years ago. And my grandpa, military, father, military, staunch military, and definitely patriots of this country. And I believe it's because they know what it's like in another country. And with the asylum process, I do have a question on that because I brought this up with a friend at a barbecue a while back after hearing it from you the first time. And he was wondering about how do we plan on getting these asylum seekers to America if they do apply and they do get asylum?
So once under the way that I envision it, the United States pays for the deportation. In essence, if you've come to this country illegally, you've been adjudicated, and you found, not able to stay in the United States, well, we pay for the plane ticket to send you back to your home country. Okay, well, we're no longer going to have to be spending a whole lot of money on the deportations because we're going to have a lot less illegal immigration under my system. And then the United States, I think, can help pay for a plane ticket. We get you into the United States if you have a valid claim, and we believe that your life and your family's life are in peril, and you've had that background check, and the United States government says yes, you have a valid asylum claim. Okay, I think we as the taxpayers can handle that plane ticket.
I believe we can. I mean, we are the melting pot. I am a huge fan of culture. I mean, we're here in Albuquerque. We all know about culture. We have one of the most diverse cultures here in Albuquerque from every single nation you can think of. They're here, met tons of them. Albuquerque is a great city on that fact, on culture. I ain't gonna lie about that. Uh, I really don't have much more questions about immigration. Do you have anything else you want to bring up about it?
No, and the other thing I ask is, if you listen to this podcast in its entirety or any of the other interviews I do, you're going to see that I'm clearly looking at what are the problems, what are the root causes, and I put forth practical solutions. You're not going to hear me just engage in rote talking points. You won't hear me saying things that are just vague and unspecific. I definitely tried to find what the solution is, and I think that's something that we don't have in Congress a lot. We have a lot of people who want to go and advance their party. We have people who want to go and advance their position. And they don't want to take a hardline position on anything if they don't have to. And as you can see, my ideals really aren't going to be framed as, as libertarians kind of get labeled as we're not Republicans who just want to get high, and we aren't Democrats who just like guns. You see, we clearly have our own value system, our own principles, and they do have crossover, which obviously makes me very well suited not only to represent the district, but also to end some of the gridlock that we have in DC by being that middle individual, that person who has legitimate crossover with both Democratic and Republican Party, and say, hey, on this bill, let me work with you guys, and on this bill, let me work with you guys. And I have a mantra that I'm willing to work with anyone to do good.
Yeah, I mean, you have my vote. I ain't gonna lie about that. From what I've heard, it sounds perfect, and I would love you to represent New Mexico for us. I hope everybody else who's watched this was able to get some explanation into further their info, I guess. Tongue twisted happens, but thank you for your time, Chris. I appreciate you taking it out of your busy day. I know it's you running a campaign and got lots of things and lots of people who are trying to pull you left and right. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this and explain everything and get your message out. I hope everyone's sat through and watched this all, because there's a lot of information that Chris just gave out, and I don't know what else to say except, do you have any closing statements other than the fact that we don't want fighting Democrats and Republicans? We want solutions. Like, I know, and that's what I see Chris brings to the table. Anything else you want to add in before we go?
Remember, June 1st, get out, vote, and vote Libertarian.
That's right, everybody. June 1st is the election day. Make sure you get out there and vote. Early voting's already started, so if you haven't gone out yet and voted, remember Chris Manning, Libertarian for the Congressional District 1. Thank you all for joining us. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and all that fun stuff. Again, I'm Nick Driver. I'm a New Mexican, and I care about you.